I enjoy trying to think about things in terms of their simplest possible form. So today, that's what I'm going to do in regard to exercise selection. I'm going to try and answer a couple of questions. First, are there any essential exercises? And second, if so, what are they? I'm going to base my answers on the assumption that you want to build a muscular, athletic and balanced physique. Obviously, if you're happy to resemble a slug, then no physical activity whatsoever is required. In fact, it's probably required that you do zero. I expect most people don't have to choose solely the essentials and can train using a wide variety of exercises, but hopefully this video can help you to decide what to prioritize or deprioritize if you're limited on time or equipment, or if you're just trying to put together a training routine for yourself. So first, are there any essential exercises? Strictly speaking, no specific exercises are absolutely essential, as in all could be replaced with another exercise or with a combination of exercises. However, we should really be talking about exercise types, or you could say movement patterns, rather than specific exercises. I like to build training programs around 6 core exercise types: a vertical push, a horizontal push, a vertical pull, a horizontal pull, a hip hinge, and a leg press movement. If you were a workout minimalist, you could probably just do one exercise from each of these categories, and if you chose well, you would build a very solid physique. In fact, if you really wanted to, you could probably build a good physique with just 4 of these. The hip hinge movement is more about strengthening your erectors than anything aesthetic. It will work glutes and hams, but glutes are covered with your leg press movement, and hamstrings aren't really a muscle group that contributes massively to physique aesthetic unless you're 6% body fat and on a bodybuilding stage. So, whilst it's not advisable, you could probably do away with those if you're happy to, live with the risks of having a weak posterior chain. You could also probably get away with not doing a horizontal pull if you chose neutral grip pull-ups as your vertical pull. They do engage your lower and mid traps and rhomboids quite a lot, and your upper traps will get a little bit of work through your vertical push movement. So you could probably build a pretty good physique with just a vertical and horizontal push, a vertical pull, and a leg press movement. But the title of this video isn't what's the absolute bare minimum you can do to build a decent physique, although that's not a bad question to ask. I'm talking about building a complete and balanced physique. So let's go back and start with my original 6 exercise types. What are the most essential exercises for a complete physique? For my vertical push, I would choose a barbell OHP, but I think a dumbbell press would be just as good, providing that it's standing or seated without back support. For my horizontal push, I'd choose a flat barbell bench press, but again, I think the dumbbell equivalent is probably just as good or only negligibly different. For my vertical pull, I would choose a neutral grip mid-width pull-up. For my horizontal pull, I would choose a good seal row if that was an option, or another chest supported low row, again with a neutral or hammer grip. For my hip hinge, I'd choose a Romanian deadlift, barbell or dumbbell, and for my leg press movement, I would choose a Bulgarian split squat. And I did make a video going into the justification as to why these are the best options for each exercise type, at least in my opinion, which I've linked in the video description if you want to watch or re-watch that. Now, if we want to build a complete physique, we have to look at what's not getting worked, or what's not getting worked adequately through those exercises. Let's start with the obvious, calves. Although there is some slight plantar flexion involved in most leg press type movements, it's not enough to stimulate any significant hypertrophy. Some people, sadly not me, are genetically blessed and simply just don't need to train calves, but assuming that you're not, a calf exercise is going to have to make it onto the short list. Personally, I think a Smith machine calf raise with a ramp, if you have one available, is probably the best all-round calf exercise if you have to choose just one. Of course, we've also got no direct ab work, and I do think direct ab training is a good idea if you want really developed abs, but I don't think I could justify calling it a must-do exercise. If you gradually gain weight and also add weight to your compound lifts, your abs will grow. So although I think they are beneficial, I wouldn't say any ab exercises are going to make this shortlist as a must-do. Beyond this, it's probably a little bit more subtle. First, I'm going to add in an overhead tricep extension. Now, you might think your triceps are already getting enough work through your presses, but let's just look at that. A 2020 study split trainees into 4 groups, performing tricep extensions alone bench press alone, and then combinations of both in different orders. After 10 weeks, they measured chest and tricep growth. It turns out bench press is great for the lateral head of the triceps, not quite as good for the medial head, and then close to useless for the long head. Total tricep growth was double in the groups that did bench press and tricep extension versus just bench press. As for vertical presses, again, they have similar issues, which are made worse by the fact that your deltoid muscles are very weak compared to your chest. What that means is that you're unlikely to be able to train your triceps with sufficient intensity because your shoulders will usually fail before you reach that point. It's what we call not being the limiting factor. Together with the fact that your tricep makes up 2/3 of your upper arm, I think this is a pretty good case for a tricep isolation being essential. An overhead extension would be the best for the long head, so this is what I would add to the list. So if we added a tricep isolation exercise, do we need to add a bicep isolation? I don't think so. I think in this case, your pull exercises will suffice for bicep development. In one study comparing lat pull down to bicep curls, the lat pull downs slightly outperformed bicep curls when looking at increases in bicep thickness. And a subsequent study found that doing both lat pull down and bicep curls was only marginally better than lat pull downs alone. So it's not quite the same as with tricep. You can't always infer some kind of symmetry in that sense. Alas, we didn't choose lat pull downs as our vertical pull. We actually chose parallel grip pull-ups, which have been shown to induce even better bicep activation than lat pull downs. Now, EMG data does have to be taken with a pinch of salt, and it's not a conclusive measure that one exercise is superior to another, but it is at least an indication. So I don't think I can call a bicep isolation movement an absolute must-do movement for a complete physique. Next, I would add a lateral raise to the list. I think solid shoulders are really the linchpin of what I would call a complete physique. In fact, I think if you've got good shoulders, you can probably get away with not having a complete physique and still look pretty sick. So your anterior or front deltoid will get enough work through both of your presses, but the lateral head or side delt is only really worked by your vertical press. Although EMG data does suggest that it gets almost the same activation from an overhead press as it does from a lateral raise, I don't think overhead pressing should be the only source of volume for that side delt. Reason being, if you got all of your side delt volume from overhead pressing, then your front delt volume would inevitably end up quite excessive once you factor in all the horizontal pressing volume. So you need to be able to train the lateral head, side delt, with an exercise that works it more than the anterior head, so you don't have like an imbalanced level of volume between those two parts of your shoulder. I would go for a machine lateral raise as my first choice, purely because you get resistance for the whole rep, or because it's a flat resistance curve. Now, if you don't have a lateral raise machine in your gym, granted they're not particularly common, then I would say probably a cable lateral raise is a close second. What you can do is a combination of raises with the cables crossed over and then raises without them crossed over. Similarly, if you only have dumbbells available, then I would probably do a combination of standing with some lying so that you can get work at the bottom and of the top of the rep as well. Finally, you could make a case for leg extensions and or leg curls. Your hamstrings will get some good development from your hip hinge movement, but there's no knee flexion involved in that, which means the short head of the biceps femoris isn't being worked, and that's the only hamstring muscle that's not involved in hip extension because it only crosses the one joint as opposed to two. So if you really wanted to cover all bases, then you would need a hamstring curl as well. To me, this is a pretty minor detail, and I don't think anyone is going to be pointing you out on the beach and telling you that the short head of your biceps femoris needs work. Whilst leg extensions are definitely beneficial, and the combination of a leg press movement plus a leg extension will be best for quad development, I do think you could still build really solid legs without them, particularly if you use a shorter stride distance on your Bulgarian split squats so that the knee joint moves through a greater range of motion. So I'm not going to say leg extensions or curls are on this list of absolute must-dos, because I think you could build a complete physique without them. So that's my short list. I honestly think these are the exercises that you cannot do without if you want a complete physique. By all means, including other exercises as well would be best, but I think these are the most essential. Now, I don't think anyone is going to train using solely these exercises, but just a note, if you did for some reason, you certainly couldn't go and do these in equal amounts. You would have to be doing some more than others to accrue enough volume for certain muscle groups. If you think I've left out any absolute essentials, either a specific exercise or an exercise type, then by all means let me know. We can have a pleasant discussion in the comments. See you later, that's me.
See me rolling. Hey king. Joey Lenny is my hero.